This is the second Q&A session I've ever done via Patreon. I'm going to try to address two questions, or questions from two people, out of the nearly infinite number of questions I've got here, coming to you from Kunming, China. We're going to try to do this in just a few minutes. This is not going to be too lengthy. I got one question from Christoph R., and this is not directly related to veganism, but indirectly it's the type of ethical question vegans ask about. He says, you mentioned doing research on working conditions in third world factories, which is true. I have done research of that kind. He then kind of misrepresents what I have to say about it, so I'm not going to read that part out. It's well-intentioned, but he either didn't get my point or he didn't really remember what I had to say on this stuff. It's cool. So he asks, what is your opinion on fair trade products? And he mentions that every so often there are news reports showing horrible conditions in sweatshops and factories, etc. Okay, so point one is, this is not a vegan issue. This is outside of veganism. And I have talked about it on my channel, and I have done research into it. So obviously it's great. There are all kinds of ethical issues we got to talk about that have nothing to do with veganism, like war. War has a lot of important ethical questions attached to it. But, you want to talk about the war in Afghanistan right now? It's not a vegan issue. Veganism has no position on it one way or the other. However, obviously vegans should think about it, engage with it. What do you think about ISIS? What do you think about Syria? What do you think about Russian occupation of Ukrainian territory? This is completely irrelevant to veganism, but very important ethical and political questions. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, nothing else is real research. There is no substitute for actually going out and doing the research yourself. And my research did actually involve visiting some of the factories. And one of the inherent biases in the mass media, such as a TV news show, is that they are only going to show you the most salacious examples, because that's what makes a good news story. So within the same city, if there were 300 factories and 280 of them have normal or boring conditions, but they found just a couple where the conditions are terrible, guess what film footage is going to be on the news that night? Now, of course, doesn't mean I hate the news media. It's great. Sure, go out, get a camera. I mean, we do that as vegans also. If we sent out film crews to 10 different slaughterhouses, what footage are we going to use? Are we going to use the best footage? Are we going to have a representative study of the full range of slaughterhouse conditions? Of the full range of even farm and dairy conditions? No. As vegans, we select the worst, most horrible, most horrifying footage. And some meat eaters and farmers do complain about that. They say, look, this is not representative. And in response, vegans can basically say, we're not even trying to be representative. We're not trying to give you a full spectrum view. We're not trying to break down what percentage of farms use these methods and what use those methods. With the slaughterhouse footage, we're just giving you shocking glimpses of some of the worst conditions that we have footage of. Obviously, I'm vegan, and I support that. But yes, it's propaganda of a kind. And yes, what the mainstream news media does with factory conditions is propaganda of a kind, whether or not they intend it to be. Generally, I think they do intend it to be. I think they just want to have a salacious story on the 6 o'clock news, and they're not interested in doing a life cycle analysis of what life is like for the employees, or of the variety of conditions that exist in factories, and of what the factors are that separate. So why are some factories worse than others? There are real answers to those questions, and you can do real research into it. But look, so he says, do you think that it is immoral to buy products manufactured in unknown conditions in the third world? That's his final question, wrapping up his, agonizing over this issue. Why did you put third world in there? Why didn't you say, is it immoral to buy products in unknown conditions, period? Why third world? You think we don't have these problems in Canada? Really? You think we don't have problems with exploitation of labor in the United States, in Europe? Really? Have you done 5 minutes of research? You think there aren't horrendous factory conditions within Italy? I did some reading randomly. I remember about the factories where purses and other high fashion items are made in Italy. It gets pretty grim, and including the fact that the employees are often illegal laborers within those factories in Italy. So then it's all being conducted outside of government oversight, outside of the law, because the employment itself is illegal. So the real question is it immoral to buy something made in conditions that are unknown to you? Well, it's ignorant. You're acting out of ignorance. Veganism, to rise to veganism, is about doing what's possible and practicable. What can you know? One of the main things you can know is the country of origin. So one of the easiest decisions you can make is to buy goods that are made in countries that have elections, that have democracy, even if it is a somewhat corrupt or dysfunctional democracy. Cambodia is in many ways a terrible example of a democracy, but nevertheless, when I was in Cambodia, we had labor unions, we had protests, we had workers protesting to get higher wages, and they did. Not easy. Why would it be easy? And Cambodia, obviously, its claims to democracy are pretty weak. It's not a positive example of democracy. But the contrast between Cambodia and, say, China is still tremendous. In terms of making an ethical decision, do you want to buy clothing made in Cambodia versus clothing made in China? There are real differences. There are differences in transparency, government accountability, the ability of workers to unionize, the ability of a free press to go and investigate and report on conditions in factories. So on that level, yes, you can make the decision to buy clothing made in countries where you know the workers will have some of those rights. Now, does that mean they all enjoy those rights? No. Does that mean, is this a perfect solution? No. But in terms of what's possible and practicable, choosing the country of origin carefully is probably the real difference you can make. In terms of fair trade branding and so on, if you do 5 minutes of research, you're going to find that that's a pretty weak and corruptible system. I did meet and speak to one person who was part of that system and who complained exactly that it was corrupt and terrible and that this really didn't mean anything. I have also seen some salacious news reports on that the fair trade system doesn't work, and wondering if it was designed not to work because it so totally fails to actually enforce any kind of ethical standards. By the way, clean laundry. If you're wondering why my exciting backdrop changes so much. Okay, Anna S. asks, are there any books, journals, or articles on vegan politics, vegan ethics, vegan community, and vegan activism? Is there something worth reading and sharing? Anna S. is one of my super heavy users on Patreon. I think she comes on every day and comments and responds to things. So, hi, Anna. No. So, long story short, I think what's interesting to reflect on is that the importance YouTube has taken on within veganism reflects the weakness of other media. So, no, I do not think we're moving in that direction. If you're looking ahead at the next 10 years, do you think that print media, such as magazines, are going to be more important in veganism or less important? Do you think the significance of digital media like YouTube is going to increase or decrease for veganism? Now, pardon me, way back in the day, more than 15 years ago, when I was involved with the Green Party in Canada, I really argued passionately to the leadership of that party, that if they did not develop a respectable magazine, they would never be a respectable political party. And it was quite a strong argument at that time, partly because the Green Party in Canada relied on sending people paper in the mail. Ultimately, the medium for the party was to collect donations, and then your reward was you got something in the mail. So at that time, I looked at magazines like The Ecologist. Again, 15 years ago. I don't know. Maybe it's a terrible magazine now. I saw only a couple issues of that. But that was a magazine that had very science-driven articles talking about ecological disasters. But also, for instance, they would have an article talking about what are the ingredients in suntan lotion and what are the real effects on your health of these chemicals that are in suntan lotion. I looked at something like that and I said, look, if the Green Party can have scientifically respectable, well-researched articles with a good editorial process, then you can build trust in the constituency, the donors, the people who support the party. Then you can start to be taken seriously for having informed opinions about ecological disasters or events within Canada. You can show you have some capacity for active research. And you can be taken seriously by your own supporters, maybe eventually by the mainstream press, by the public at large. So at that time, I was really insisting on the importance of their developing their print media capability. Because they were publishing stuff on paper. It was just garbage. They'd publish like a newsletter, but all it said was donate money to the Green Party. We promise we're going to save the world. there was no substance, there was no intellectual substance, no political substance, or what have you. For veganism, next 5 years, no. Veganism as a broad tent, veganism as a whole, I do not think it's moving towards print media at all. I think what currently exists on paper is garbage. I think the only real books that come out that people read connected to veganism are celebrity-driven books. Guys like Georges Monbiot, who are already famous, or, a famous singer, famous actor, famous athlete becomes vegan. They may publish a book on veganism, and that may be written about in magazine articles. But no, I mean, the whole print media world is very weak for veganism as a broad tent. However, something I discussed towards the end of my interview with the Light Twins, on the other hand, you could have vital and meaningful print media for smaller circles within veganism. I've said several times it would be wonderful to get organized just vegan scientists, or even just vegans doing research in the health sciences and the life sciences, because of the connection to vivisection, animal testing, those issues. So could you have a print media publication to give a voice for those people? Yes. And those people would probably be highly motivated to contribute to a magazine or journal of that kind and to see it have high editorial standards. So when you have a specific profession, vegans within that profession, sure, you could have a great journal or great magazine. Probably vegan restaurateurs, vegan franchise owners, people who run restaurants who make money out of vegan food. Probably they could have an industry publication. Would probably be very successful. But I mean, almost anything. Vegan architects, even though veganism isn't related to architecture really, you could probably have specialized publications where there's enough interest and passion within one profession where those people have a lot in common to make paper publication work. Or obviously, if you actually have a political party like the Green Party, that could work. But no, for veganism as a big tent, I don't think that's the direction we're moving in at all. And for me, that reflects the fundamental fact that veganism is internally fractious, fragmentary, divisive, and divided. And it's going to stay that way. It's going to remain a beautiful, cacophonous mixture of left-wing and right-wing and centrist and atheist and religious and Buddhist and Hindu and Jew. And, it's people who are vegan for strictly ethical reasons, for ecological reasons, people who are vegan for the sake of vanity or health, people who are vegan who are really passionate about animal rights defined as animal rights, as opposed to people who approach it more from a climate change perspective or saving the rainforest perspective. And of course, there are going to be people who are focused on specific species, saving the bears, saving the whales. For that big tent, the crazy cat ladies, all the way over to the recovering anorexics, all you people. I mean, you know who you are. Some of you talk to me every day. There's, that diversity, to try to harness that in one magazine, boosting, it ain't going to work. Whereas we do, in a sense, harness it here on YouTube. We get to reflect that diversity. We get to capture that cacophony. But I do hope, as moving forward, we're going to see some of those more focused organizations within veganism, just for scientists or just for other special interest groups. Okay, thanks for the questions, guys. I mean, hey, 2 questions under 20 minutes.